Known for the historic Indianapolis 500, Circle City Classic, the Indiana Black Expo Summer Celebration, a former Super Bowl host city, and host of the Pan Am Games, Indianapolis is a multicultural, world-class city. But it hasn't always been that way. Nowhere has the culture of separate and unequal become more evident than in the school system.
One of the dynamics in remote learning, e-learning, was that it wasn't equal across economic classes, certainly across school district. Kids in lower income, lower performing schools just don't have the resources.
You know, you can ask any realtor. They can tell you by zip code how the schools are going to be and how the kids are going to do. And a lot of the money that should be going into these kids in public education is being diverted.
Recent findings from the Indiana Department of Education's iLearn assessment, they show troubling stats regarding Black students in grades 3 through 8.
19.7% of Black students were proficient in English, 16.7% in math, 10.9% in both English and math, 13.1% in science, and 15.8% in social studies.
Outcomes that were not by accident. Once a stronghold of the Ku Klux Klan, the history of the public school system in Indianapolis tells the story of a complicated racial past. Indianapolis Public Schools, or IPS, has been at the center of a long and complex struggle for equity in education. From the days of segregation to the ongoing challenges of systemic inequality, its story reflects the broader fight for justice, not just in Indianapolis, but in all American schools. The district was incorporated in 1853, but it wasn't until the 1920s that the population in Indianapolis started expanding, and the growing school system needed to make adjustments so that all students, regardless of race or background, could succeed.
Black teachers taught Black students. White teachers taught white students. I looked at the textbooks and resources and found that the only thing that reflected my students was the chapter on slavery.
IPS was a district that was divided and mirrored the division in the Circle City. In IPS in the 1920s, schools were built, even moved, to reinforce segregation and inequity in education. Historian John Laughlin said the schools accomplished exactly what they were meant to.
What they did was make a society who's going to have certain people be doctors and lawyers, and certain people cleaning up after these doctors and lawyers.
Even after the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education ruling, integration would take 14 more years in Indianapolis and led to a whole host of new challenges for Black students and their families.
I'm Shauna Murphy. I grew up at 2939 North Park by Broadway United Methodist Church. I attended school number 76, and it was wonderful. We were a walking community, and so we literally could walk a few blocks and be in community on our way to school, in community while we were at school, and even after school with our teachers and administrators living in our community.
I remember seeing Black teachers and just like a Black administration with maybe one or two whites. And it was a little different than going to Decatur Township. We did have some Black teachers, not very many. So that was a kind of a culture shock because the teachers were basically all white. I saw a lot of white admin. I didn't have that same treatment as I did in the IPS school system. I did feel a little isolated because I did see a difference in how they handled the Black students opposed to the white students.
My guidance counselor, college isn't for Black people. If you're going to go anywhere, you should either try to go on the groups program or you should go to Ivy Tech. But DePaul University, you can never get into.
In 1969, the federal court mandated the integration of school staff, followed by the start of intra-district student busing by 1972. In 1981, forced busing expanded beyond Indianapolis public schools to include students traveling to townships like Decatur, Wayne, Franklin, Perry, and Warren.
We knew there was a difference in how we were treated, how white teachers were treated, because there came a time when they started sending what they called their best black teachers to the white schools. I was sent to School 61, right in back of the racetrack. All white students at that time. White parents were walking the halls, looking in our classrooms because they didn't think we could teach their white children. I invited them into my classroom because I knew I was a good teacher. And I put them to work. If you want to be out there watching me, you come on in and you'll be sitting right here learning, right here with your child, so you can experience my greatness as a teacher.
I remember being in second grade, and they called my mom and they told her, I believe she needs to be held back. She's not social. And I wasn't social because it was a culture shock. I came from a IPS school where there were a sense of community. It was all of the black students, black teachers, and now I'm out here with all these white. I would fold into myself as a child because I was treated different at this school than I was at this IPS school where everybody looked the same as me.
Just being able to really pay attention to how systemically decisions are made for groups of people. And I knew that going into high school. Those systemic decisions have generational impacts on communities.
Busing lasted for 30 years. It ended in 2001 when two significant events reshaped the education landscape: the enactment of the No Child Left Behind Act, which used test scores to identify struggling schools, and the launch of Indiana charter schools and the implementation of model school programs funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Title I, aimed at boosting literacy and math skills. But for black students, being in the same school did not mean equal education. Even standardized testing didn't tell the whole story.
Standardized testing really tests how white you are, how male you are, and how rich you are. It's predicted who's going to pass the test. I can predict that Billy's going to do better than Sue. People from the suburbs are going to do better than homeboys in the inner city. And it's all predictable based on those because the standardized test, and we know that because we helped create the standardized testing.
Scores that were already lower among black students plummeted during the pandemic. Challenges such as food insecurity, job loss, and unemployment affected black families most severely. Indiana's iLearn exams revealed a staggering 50% decrease in proficiency among black students. By 2021, 90% failed to meet proficient standards, with a marginal improvement the following year, still leaving 82% falling short. And the funding that could have been used to improve education outcomes was in large part funneled outside of public school buildings. By 2022, there were 62 charter schools inside IPS boundaries, and a host of private and religious schools, too.
They privatized the very institution that the government created to sustain itself. They're making sure that these schools now are not democratic at all. Because I can't elect the board, and the public schools take all students, got to take all students, and the charters don't have to do that, but they're not public. They say they are, they want to be, they take public money. As a parent, when I sign my child up to a charter school, I'm disenfranchising myself.
The persistent disparities in educational outcomes remind us of the complex and evolving nature of this struggle. The Indiana Council on Educating Students of Color, or ICESC, is committed to championing educational equity for our black children, employing a whole village approach that brings together all stakeholders to create a brighter future. Thanks to the Eli Lilly Endowment and the Indianapolis Urban League, we're working to advance our mission and empower our community.
So we began the process of examining, well, all of these failures, why, and what is the solution to these failures? We brought Dr. Chike Akua to Indianapolis to begin to talk about the focus on building the will. It's a model that we use to actually engage stakeholders in the community, especially parents. We began to work in the community as well as with 5 schools in the after-school program.
And we need your help. Let us honor the past by working for a better future. Join us in turning the tide and creating a legacy of educational excellence and equity.
Black children they are born, they come out of the womb with a divine soul. That's what we've got to bring out in Black children. They come equipped with tolerance, forgiveness, respect, and that has to go both ways. But teachers have to understand this and how to bring out the brilliance that these children bring with them to the classroom. They've got to be able to use the child's experience and infuse that into their instruction.